Hi, my name's Paul Grogan, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you how to play Ezra and Nehemiah. In 587 BC, the city of Jerusalem fell after a 30-month siege, and the Babylonians destroyed the city along with its temple. Decades later, in the aftermath of the Persian conquest of Babylon, Cyrus the Great issued an edict to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. In Ezra and Nehemiah, you and up to 3 other players will be repairing the city walls, building the temple, and teaching the Torah to the returning exiles. You will be developing your land, travelling to settlements outside of the city walls, and keeping the fire of the altar burning bright. Historically, the rebuilding of the temple and the reconstruction of the city happened at different times and over many years. This game combines all of those things together and takes place over a 3-week period. A big thank you to Garfield Games for sponsoring this video, but I also rely on the financial support of my Patreon campaign to keep the channel going. So if you want to support me directly and become one of my supporters, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingrules. In this video, I'll be explaining the rules for the 2 to 4 player game. For the solo rules, check out the rulebook for the full details. Place the main board in the middle of the play area. Place the 6 gate cards nearby. Ensure that they are all showing the side with the outline of the worker. If you're playing a 4-player game, that's it for the gate cards, but if you're playing with 2 or 3 players, there's a few more steps. In a 2-player game, flip over the muster gate and the east gate, and then move these cards onto the corresponding spaces on the main board. Place neutral wall cards on these 6 spaces here. And finally, for a 2-player game, place 2 silver coins on each of the other gate cards. In a 3-player game, cover the 3 spaces between the muster gate and the east gate with neutral wall cards, and place 1 silver on each gate card. The pre-built gates and neutral wall cards represent sections that have already been rebuilt. In a 4-player game, everything needs rebuilding. Next, place the silver and the food tokens nearby to form the main supply. Then, place 10 of each of the resources into the main supply: gold, stone, wood, and cinders. Place the rest of the resources into the rubble bag and give it a good shake. On each wall and gate space of the main board, draw a number of resources randomly from the bag as indicated by the number of these icons, and then place those resources on the space. After doing this for all of the spaces, add the remaining resources from the bag to the main supply. The bag can then be returned to the box. Separate the scroll tiles based on their backs. On the top row in this part of the main board, randomly place the scroll tiles with the gold backs, 1 on each space. On the next 2 rows, place scrolls with the wooden backs, and on the bottom row, place the scrolls with the stone backs, which are the 3 heroes. Any scrolls left over are returned to the box. Place 3 food to the side of the top row, 2 food alongside the next row, and 1 food alongside the next row. The bottom row has no food next to it. If playing with fewer than 4 players, place the temple mount on the main board, covering over the existing temple. This side up for a 3-player game, and this side up for a 2-player game. Take the altar cards, each of which is 2-sided, and by choice or at random, decide which side of which card to use and place it below the altar. Return the unused card to the box. Place the 2 prophets onto the numbered spaces of the altar track, as indicated by the topmost numbers on the altar card. Here, you place the prophets on spaces 4 and 7. Place the 3 hero cards nearby. Each player takes a player board and a player aid. Choose a starting player at random and give them the shofar. Take the development tiles and sort them by type. Each player takes a random development tile of each type and places them on their player board, slotted into the corresponding space so that the artwork lines up correctly. Ensure that each tile is placed so that it shows the undeveloped side and not the side with the buildings and the nice green areas. Take 1 of each blessing marker and place them on the 0 space of their corresponding tracks. Each player chooses a colour and takes all of the components in that colour: 16 workers, an altar marker, a VP marker, and a tent. Also take your 10 character cards and your 12 wall cards. Place 6 of your workers into your supply by the side of your player board. These are the only ones that you have access to at the start of the game. Place the rest of them in the main supply. Place the altar markers on space 0 of the altar track. Stack them so that the player with the shofar is on top, the next marker is the next player clockwise, and so on. Each player places their VP marker on the 10 space of the score track. The order here doesn't matter. Place the tents on the top centre space in this part of the main board. Again, the order here doesn't matter. Take your 12 wall cards, shuffle them, and place them near your board. Take your 10 character cards, shuffle them, and also place them near your board. Draw the top 4 of these cards and place them into your hand. Take the 2 resources shown in the bottom left of your guards tile and place them onto the spaces of that tile. Each player also takes 3 food and 5 silver. On the bottom space of the Levite track, take a worker of each player from the main supply and place them on the bottom space. These workers are known as Levites. Then, in reverse turn order, beginning with the player to the right of the starting player and going counterclockwise, each player takes a worker from the main supply and places it on one of the corner gates on the main board. These workers are known as gatekeepers. In a 3-player game, one of the corner gates will be empty. Place one of the white workers on that gate. In a 2-player game, each player places 2 gatekeepers, both taken from the main supply. The non-starting player places their first one, followed by the starting player, and then each player in the same order places their second gatekeeper. Also in a 2-player game, place a white worker on the 2 outer scrolls on the bottom row of the Torah. And with setup complete, you're now ready to play. Ezra and Nehemiah is played over 3 rounds, each representing 1 week of time, and each round consists of 7 days. The first 6 days of the week, Sunday to Friday, are for working. On each of those days, players will take a turn, starting with the player with the shofar and going clockwise. On your turn, you will choose one of the cards in your hand, play it, carry out your actions, and then draw a new card. Saturday is the Sabbath, the day of rest, when players will be required to face the judgment of the prophets and also feed their workers. Victory points, or VP for short, will be gained based on where each player has focused their efforts in the previous week. After the 3rd week, the game ends and the player with the most points wins. As just mentioned, the first 6 days of each week is a work day. On each work day, starting with the player with the shofar and going clockwise, each player takes a turn. Nothing special happens at the end of a day, you just continue taking turns until each player has taken 6 turns. On your turn, you must first play a card from your hand to your player board. Then you perform one main action, either a red banner action, a grey banner action, or a blue banner action. And then finally, you draw a card from your deck to your hand so that you have 4 cards again. In addition to this, at any point on your turn, you can perform 1 auxiliary action. And also at any point on your turn, you can use 1 trader and/or 1 elder. Let's start with the first step of your turn, playing a card. Choose any card from your hand and place it onto one of the 3 spaces at the bottom of your player board. Each space can have no more than 2 cards played to it, and this is the turn tracker. Once you have 2 cards on each space, you know that you have played 6 turns. For the first 3 days of the week, it is recommended you play your cards onto the empty spaces, as there is usually no benefit for covering a card early. But then on the 4th day of the week, the card you play must cover over a previously placed card. And then on the 5th day, you cover over another card, and on the 6th day, you cover up the final card. So why is this important? Well, it's all to do with the banners on the cards. You see, once you have played a card, the next step of your turn is to perform your main action. The 3 main actions are summarised on your player aid, and you have a choice of doing a red banner action, a grey banner action, or a blue banner action. And the strength of that action, or how much you can do with the action, is based on the number of banners of the matching colour that you have showing, not just on the card you've played, but on the other cards too. For example, on Sunday, you choose to play the teacher, and then you choose to perform the blue banner action, and you do so with the strength of 3 banners. On the Monday, you play the musician. You could choose to perform the red banner action with the strength of 2, or the blue banner action with the strength of 4. On Tuesday, you play the soldier. You could perform the blue banner action with the strength of 6, the grey banner action with the strength of 1, or even the red banner action with the strength of 2, even though there were no red banners on the card that you just played. On Wednesday, you play the gatherer, covering over the musician. You could perform blue with the strength of 6, grey with the strength of 2, or red with the strength of 1. On Thursday, you play the mason, covering over the teacher. You could perform blue with the strength of 3, grey with the strength of 5, or red with the strength of 1. And finally, on Friday, you play the jeweller, covering the soldier. You could perform blue with the strength of 1, grey with the strength of 6, or red with the strength of 2. Don't worry about the things at the top and the bottom of the cards for now, I'll come back to those later, but they will influence which card you choose to play on your turn. After you've played your card, it's time to perform your main action. And as mentioned previously, you have a choice of performing a red action, a grey action, or a blue action. I've already explained the primary way in which you gain banners, by adding up the banners on the visible cards on your player board. But there are other ways in which you can gain banners too, which I'll explain later on. Think of the banners that you have as a kind of currency, and when performing your main action, you will spend those banners to do things. And it's possible to gain more banners whilst performing your main action. In this case, just add those banners onto what you have available for the turn. You don't have to spend all of the banners you have available if you don't want to, but any unused are wasted. The red banner action is all about the temple and the altar, as indicated by the cost of doing things in these areas. There is a special rule, however, when performing the red action, and that is, before or after performing the action, you may place one worker from your supply onto the next space up of your column below the temple. That worker is now a Levite. To do so, you must pay the cost in food shown to the left of the row, in this case 2 food. To pay a food cost, return the appropriate amount of food from your supply to the main supply. If you cannot pay the food, you cannot place the worker. After placing the Levite, you immediately gain the reward shown to the right of the row, in this case 1 cinders. Take the cinders from the main supply and place it on an available space of your guards tile. Each player can have no more than 6 Levites below the temple. Performing the red action allows you to spend your available banners to either place resources in the temple or to place resources on the altar. To place a resource in the temple, you must choose a row and spend the number of banners shown to the left of that row. To place a resource on the altar costs either 3 banners to place wood or 1 banner to place cinders. And as well as the cost in banners, you are limited on the total number of resources that you can place, both across the temple and the altar, 1 resource for each Levite that you have. For example, if you, as blue, are performing the red action and you now have 2 Levites below the temple, then if you have 6 red banners to spend, you could use 1 Levite to place a resource on the middle row of the temple and the other to place some wood on the altar. You could not, however, place 3 resources on the second row of the temple. Even though this also costs 6 banners, you are placing 3 resources, which would require 3 Levites. But there is another use for Levites too. Each one that isn't being used to place a resource gives you 1 extra red banner. For example, if you have 2 Levites and you perform the red action, but you only have 2 red banners, you can use one of the Levites to give you an extra red banner and then use those 3 banners and the other Levite to place 1 wood on the altar. When you place a resource in the temple, you can choose any of the rows, but each row must be filled from left to right. For example, if you place a resource here, then the next resource placed in the temple could be on any of these 5 spaces. Immediately after you place a resource in the temple, you gain 1 point if you placed wood or stone, and 2 points if you placed gold. And as any good builder will tell you, it's unwise to build a temple out of cinders, so it is not allowed to place that type of resource in the temple. You also gain the reward depicted to the right of the row where you place the resource: 1 silver, 1 food, 1 tent movement, which I'll explain later, and 1 worker. To gain a new worker, take it from the main supply and add it to your own supply. Once a row is complete, no more resources can be placed on that row. The temple is also divided into 3 sectors, and there is a bonus for completing a sector. In a 4-player game, for example, these are the 3 sectors. If, after you have placed a resource, you have filled one of the sectors completely, you resolve the effects shown here. First, the player who completed the sector gains 2 food. Then, the player with the most Levites gains 2 points. If tied, like here, it's the tied player farthest ahead on the altar track who gains the points. Next, the player with the least Levites loses 1 point. And if tied, it's the tied player farthest behind on the altar track who loses the point. And finally, each player gains 1 silver for each Levite they have. Note that in a 2-player game, there is no penalty for having the least Levites when a sector is completed. Instead of your Levites carrying resources to the temple, they can place them on the altar. Placing wood requires 3 banners and advances your altar marker 2 spaces. Placing cinders costs 1 banner and advances your marker 1 space. Any resources used in this way can either be placed on the altar or just returned to the main supply if you prefer. When you advance on the altar, simply move your marker forward. If you move onto a space containing another player's marker, place yours on top. For each space that you move to or move past, you gain the bonus depicted below the space on the track. This icon is food, this one is silver, this is gold, this is 1 tent movement, which I'll come to later, this is simply 2 points, and these 3 are blessings. When you gain a blessing, advance the corresponding blessing marker on your player board 1 space forward. I'll explain blessings in more detail later on. One important rule about the altar track is that the order of the player's markers on it acts as a tiebreak for all situations where a tiebreaker is needed. And if 2 or more markers are on the same space, then it's the one on the bottom who is considered farther ahead. In other words, the player who got to that space first. So here, blue is the farthest ahead and purple is the farthest behind. Once your marker reaches the end of the altar track, each further space you would advance, you gain 1 silver instead. And since I'm talking about the altar track, remember those profits that we placed in setup? Well, the position of your marker on the altar track in relation to those profits will be important during the Sabbath, which I'll explain later in the video. The grey banner action is all about clearing rubble, building walls and gates. The most important rule about performing the grey action is that you must select a single wall or gate space around the edge of the board. Any rubble on the space must be cleared before you can then build the wall or gate. And you can both clear rubble and build in the same turn, or you could just clear rubble but not build. And if the space was already cleared of rubble, you could build there. The only real limitation is that you can only focus on one space during the action. The cost to clear each cube of rubble is depicted here. 1 banner for cinders, 2 for stone or wood, and 3 for gold. To remove the rubble, take the cubes from the space on the main board and place them on your guards tile. You are limited on the maximum number of resources that you can store at the end of a turn, as indicated by the number of spaces. It is not required to remove all of the rubble at once, although it is usually beneficial to do so. The player who removes the last rubble cube from a wall space gains the blessing depicted on the wall. Clearing rubble from gates does not provide a blessing, as there is no blessing icon on the space. Once the rubble has been cleared from a space, the corresponding wall or gate can be built, either during the same action or later in the game on another action. To build a wall or gate, you must spend the grey banners shown on the space along with the resources depicted. And it is allowed to use the resources that you just gained from clearing any rubble. And remember, your resource limit based on your guards tile only applies at the end of a turn, so you could exceed that limit temporarily when clearing rubble and then use those resources to build, meaning that you don't lose them. Whenever you build a section of wall, draw the top 3 cards from your own personal deck of wall cards. Choose one of them and place it on the space where you are building. Immediately gain the benefit depicted on the card. Here, for example, you gain 1 point. Of the 2 wall cards that you did not select, place one on the bottom of your deck and the other one on top. If you have fewer than 3 wall cards left when you build a wall, just draw what you have, but once you have built 12 walls, you can build no more. The cost to build a gate is always 3 banners, 1 wood and 2 stone. After paying the cost, take the corresponding gate card and place it on top of the space. If there was any silver on this card, you gain that silver. Then you must place one of your available workers onto the gate as a gatekeeper, gaining the depicted bonus. If you have no available workers, you cannot build the gate. As depicted here, whenever you are building a wall or gate, you can use 3 grey banners or a gold instead of a stone or wood, and you can do this multiple times. So here, you could build this gate with 6 grey banners and 2 gold, if you really wanted to. Every wall and gate card depicts a certain number of points in the bottom left corner. These are only scored at the end of the game. If you build a wall next to a previously built gate, or vice versa, you and the player who built the thing that you're connecting to gain a reward. For example, blue has previously built the muster gate. If red then builds a wall next to the muster gate, both red and blue gain 1 cinders and 1 stone, as depicted above the gate. Then, later in the game, the yellow player builds this wall. Both they and the blue player gain 1 cinders and 1 stone. And the same is true even if the wall and gate are built the other way round. So here, these walls have already been built. If blue now builds the east gate, 2 connections are made. So blue and purple gain 2 cinders for the first connection, and then blue and red gain 2 cinders for the other connection. However, each player can only gain the rewards once for making each connection. So here, if blue builds a wall next to the horse gate, which they claimed at the start of the game, they only gain 1 stone and 1 silver, and not 2 of each. If playing with fewer than 4 players, some of the walls and gates have already been rebuilt before the game starts. These spaces cannot be interacted with in any way. And if you build a gate next to a neutral wall or vice versa, it does not form a connection and you do not gain the reward. The blue banner action is all about teaching the Torah and moving your tent around the city. You can spend your blue banners either in this part of the main board, which represents the Torah, and or moving your tent around the city here. And you can do either or both of these things in any order, but each can only be done once. You can only place 1 scribe and you can only move your tent once. To teach the Torah, place a worker from your supply onto a scroll tile. That worker is now a scribe and remains there for the rest of the game. And each scroll can only have 1 scribe on it. The first scribe in the game must be placed onto a scroll in the bottom row, onto one of the heroes. but once placed, the 2 spaces above it become available to all players. And when one is placed on one of those, the 2 spaces above that become available. The cost to place a scribe is indicated to the left of the row, and it's a combination of blue banners and also money or gold. In addition to this, you must pay 1 silver for each scribe belonging to another player that you are using to reach your scroll. For example, you are blue and you are about to place a scribe. These scrolls are available to you. Placing on either of these spaces will cost you 7 blue banners and 2 gold, and you must also pay 1 silver to purple for the link. Or you could place here at a cost of 6 banners and 1 gold, and also paying 1 silver to either purple or yellow. Or you could place here 6 banners and 1 gold, and also 1 silver to yellow. Or you could place here at a cost of 5 banners and 3 silver, and 1 silver to yellow. And finally, you could place here at a cost of 3 banners and 2 silver. The first player to place a scribe in one of the top 3 rows gains all of the food at the right of that row. The points shown next to each row indicate how many points each scribe is worth at the end of the game. Each scroll gives you a permanent ability to use during the game. They are all fully explained near the back of the rulebook, and although I'm not going to cover them all in this video, I will explain a few of them now. The stone scrolls on the bottom row give you the corresponding character card. You immediately gain the rewards at the bottom of the card based on which round of the game you are in. In round 1, you just gain the leftmost reward. In round 2, you gain these 2 rewards, and if you take the hero in round 3, you gain all of the rewards. Then you tuck the card beneath your player aid so that only the top section is visible. You now have 1 permanent banner of that colour for the rest of the game. The gold scrolls in the top row all give you extra points at the end of the game, in addition to the 4 points for just being in the row. Once you know the game, it's recommended to look at the gold scrolls that are in the game at the start so that you have something to aim for if you choose to go down that route. As mentioned in setup, in a 2-player game, there are white workers on the outer 2 characters. You can use these scribes to place on higher scrolls, but you must pay the 1 silver to the bank. Or you could place your worker onto the tile with the neutral scribe. If you do, move the scribe to the tile above, keeping as close to the edge as possible. If a neutral scribe ever reaches the top row, remove it from the game. The other option you have for spending blue banners is to move your tent around the city. And I mentioned earlier that you can only move your tent once on your turn, either before or after you place a scribe. Well, that's true, but when you do move your tent, you can move it 1, 2, 3 or 4 spaces by paying the cost shown here. 2 banners to move 1 space, 4 banners to move 2 spaces, 7 banners and a cinders, stone or wood to move 3 spaces, and 10 banners and a cinders, stone or wood to move 4 spaces. You cannot combine these options, so it is not allowed to spend 12 banners, for example, to move 5 spaces. Each space you move advances your tent 1 space clockwise, and there's no limit to the number of tents on each space. The other players do not block you. After moving your tent, you gain each bonus that you pass over. As depicted in the middle of this area, if you ever gain a worker but you already have all of your workers, or you gain a blessing but you cannot take it because you already have the maximum, then you move your tent 1 space instead. And those things apply throughout the game, not just when gaining a worker or blessing from moving your tent. In addition to your main action, you may perform 1 auxiliary action on your turn which can be performed at any time. You have 2 options for an auxiliary action which are shown at the bottom of your player aid: trade or flip a development tile. To trade, you use one of the trading options on the card that you played this turn. This type of trade allows you to sell resources for coins, and you can do it any number of times. This type of trade, however, requires you to first pay 1 silver to the owner of the indicated gate. If the gate has not yet been built, place the silver onto the gate card instead. That money will go to the player who builds the gate. If you own the gate, you don't need to pay. And in a 2-player game, if trading at the muster gate or the east gate, the cost is paid to the main supply. Then you conduct one of the trades listed on the card. Here you can either just gain 1 stone, or you can pay an additional 2 silver which goes to the main supply for 2 stone. The other auxiliary action that you can do is to flip one of your development tiles, and this can even be done before you play a card. To do this, you must pay the indicated resources shown in the top left of the tile. You then gain the bonus shown with the green background and flip the tile over. As shown here, each flipped tile is worth 2 points at the end of the game. If there are any workers next to a development tile when you flip it, and I'll explain soon how you place workers there, they do not move, nor do they gain any additional benefit for the tile flipping, even if the bonus they are next to is better than the one before. What each development tile does is explained in the rulebook. In addition to your main action and your auxiliary action, you can also use one trader and/or one elder on your turn, but no more than one of each. To use a trader, place one of your available workers onto an empty space to the left of your trading tile, and then gain the benefit depicted. The fronts of each trading tile are identical, but when flipped over, they are all different. To use an elder, place one of your available workers onto an empty space to the left of your elder tile, and again, gain the benefit depicted, which, as you will notice, is extra banners, and on the developed side, possibly something else too. For example, you play the soldier and you want to perform the blue banner action. You have 6 blue banners, but you really want 8. No worries, just place a worker on this space, choose to take 2 additional blue banners, and also gain a silver. Note that you only gain the bonus for placing a trader or elder once on the turn that you place it. Traders and elders remain in their spaces until the end of the week, when they will be returned back to your supply. We've already seen a few ways in the game in which you can gain a blessing. Each time you do, you move the corresponding marker one space to the right. And sometimes in the game you will see this icon. This is a wild blessing, and it means that you can gain any type of blessing. Each time you have a full set of blessings, you gain the bonus shown at the top of the column for that set. For example, here you gain an orange blessing. You now have 1 full set, and you gain 1 movement on the altar track. If you then gain another orange and a red blessing, you now have 2 full sets, so you get to move your tent 1 space, and so on. Anytime you would gain a blessing, but you are unable to do so because you already have all of the blessings of that type, you move your tent 1 space instead. Saturday is the 7th day of the week and time for rest. First, all players must prepare for the Sabbath and then conduct the Sabbath itself. When preparing for the Sabbath, players can usually resolve this simultaneously. However, if there are any timing disputes, resolve each player's preparation in turn order. To prepare for the Sabbath, you will use farmers and labourers, resolve the judgment of the prophets, and you may also have other effects to resolve too, such as this scroll. This icon here represents preparing for the Sabbath. And you can resolve each of these steps in any order you want to. But first, I'll explain using farmers and labourers. If you have any workers remaining in your supply, each of them must be assigned as either a farmer, by placing them on this tile, or as a labourer by placing them on this tile. Thematically, you aren't just sending the worker out during the Sabbath. It is, after all, a day of rest. This just represents what they have been doing during the week, and you now gain the rewards. Each farmer gains the things printed on the tile. Also, if the farming tile has been flipped, you gain an extra bonus during preparation. That bonus is just once, not per farmer. Each labourer gains either of the benefits printed on the tile. Here, this labourer can produce 2 non-gold resources, or 1 non-gold resource and 2 silver. To resolve the judgment of the prophets, look at the position of your marker on the altar track. If it's to the left of the dark grey prophet, you resolve the effect shown in the left column of the altar card. This one in round 1, this one in round 2, and this one in round 3. If your marker is between the prophets, you get the middle column effect. And if your marker is to the right of the light grey prophet, you get the effect in the right column. For example, at the end of round 1, the markers are like this. Purple loses 1 point, red and yellow both gain a red blessing, and blue gains a blessing of their choice. A lot of the icons on the altar cards will be familiar to you, but if you see one that you don't understand, check out the relevant page in the rulebook for an explanation of what it does. Once all players have prepared, it's time for the Sabbath itself, represented by this icon. This step can be carried out simultaneously by all players. First, you must pay 1 food for each of your workers, except for any workers still in the main supply and also any Levites. In other words, gatekeepers, scribes, traders and elders, and farmers and labourers. An easy way to calculate this is 16 minus the number of Levites and your workers still in the main supply. You must pay the food if you have it, and for each worker that you cannot feed, you lose 2 points. Next, from the 6 cards that you have on your player board, you must tuck 1 of them into the top of your player aid, above any cards already there. And if this is the Sabbath in round 2, you actually took 2 cards instead of 1, as depicted here. Choosing which card to tuck is a big decision. It gives you a permanent extra banner of the colour shown, And, as I'm going to explain in more detail soon, it gives you the scoring condition printed on the card in each Sabbath. So, the card that you took in the Sabbath of round 1 will score for you 3 times during the game. The 2 that you took in round 2 will score twice, and the 1 that you took in round 3 just once. But also, the card that you took is gone from your deck, meaning that you have lost the possibility to play that card in the future for its banners and its trade ability. The final step of the Sabbath is to score all of the cards that you have took. This one, for example, is simply 1 point for each wall that you have built. Each of these is fully described on the back page of the rulebook. After the Sabbath, there are some things to clear up before the start of the next round. If this was the last round of the game, you can skip this part and go straight to final scoring. First, move the profits on the altar track to the spaces indicated on the next row. For example, if you are moving from round 1 to 2, move the profits to spaces 8 and 12. The player with the shofar passes it to the player to their left. Each player returns all of the workers from their player board back to their supply. The player whose altar marker is the farthest ahead gains 1 new worker. Each player shuffles the remaining character cards on their player board to form a new draw pile. If this was the end of round 2, you will only have 3 cards in hand, as you would have been unable to draw one on your last turn of round 2. In this case, draw another card to your hand so that you now have 4. After the 3rd Sabbath, the game comes to an end and you perform final scoring. First, all players convert any remaining resources into silver. Each gold is sold for 3 silver. Each stone or wood is worth 2 silver. Each food is also worth 2 silver. And each cinders is worth 1 silver. Then you score 1 point for every 5 silver. So here you would score 2 points. Each of your flipped development tiles is worth 2 points. 3 points is given to the player farthest ahead on the altar. And remember, if more than one player is on a space, it's the one who's on the bottom that is considered farthest ahead. You then score the points depicted on all of the walls and gates that you have built. And you gain points for each scribe based on which row they are on. And bonus points for the scribes on the top row based on the scoring condition printed on the scroll. And the player with the most points wins. In case of a tie, the tied player who is farthest ahead on the altar is the winner. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to play Ezra and Nehemiah. If you have any questions about the game, please leave them in the comments. And whilst you're there, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. And as mentioned earlier, I do rely on the financial support of my Patreon to keep the channel going. So if you are in a position to be able to do so, please visit patreon.com/gamingrules for exclusive access to the Gaming Rules community and some additional bonus content. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching.